19 Wells Street. It's a small apartment. Sadly, you'll see some images of that apartment in the aftermath of what the defendant did in the evening hours of December 24th of 2025. But he was home, going about his business, with every expectation that he would go to bed that night and wake up the next day. What he didn't know was that kind of across town, the defendant was getting into a 2015 Kia Sportage with his partner, Chad King. Throughout the day, the defendant had been sending threatening texts to Mr. Rhinehart, including a text that said, "We're going to pay you a visit." And he did. And I guess if the defendant gets, he did what he said he was going to do. And that is, he arrived in the area of Mr. Rhinehart's apartment. He got out of the Kia Sportage, walked to Mr. Rhinehart's apartment with Chad Kinney. The defendant looked through windows in the apartment as Mr. Kinney posted up, armed and ready to do what he eventually did. At some point, someone in the home starts to move toward the back door. You'll see the back door open. We'll look at the video here in a second. And Mr. Kinney fired the shots that killed Mr. Rhinehart. We're going to talk about the evidence in this case and how we know that all of that occurred beyond a reasonable doubt, and how we know that the defendant was an active participant in everything that happened that night leading to Mr. Rhinehart's death. And this is what they did. A couple of things about this image. Sadly, this is Mr. Rhinehart. He has a bullet wound to the right center of his chest, which took his life. You'll also see, when you see the full image, that on this dresser or TV counter, whatever it is, there's a cell phone. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. And as we frame our discussion of the evidence in this case, we've talked about the phrase acting in concert with. We've talked about it all the way through jury selection. Another way to phrase that is accomplice liability. You're going to get this instruction at the end of the trial, or language very close to it. So this is just to kind of frame how you look at the evidence in the case. You will likely hear that the evidence doesn't have to show that the accomplice personally participated in the commission of each element in a particular offense. Rather, an accomplice is responsible for all acts committed by a partner, teammate, confederate, which are a probable and natural consequence of their concerted actions, even though the acts may not have been originally conceived or intended to be planned. That's the law here. The defendant has to be an active, knowing participant. The alternative, obviously, is he's in the wrong place at the wrong time, which we'll submit to you at the end of the case is absolutely not the case. A little bit more language to frame your evaluation in the case. In determining whether a defendant aided another in the commission of a crime, you can consider the following. Was he there? Was he with someone else that was engaged in the criminal activity? Did he oppose the commission of the crime? And then we'll talk a lot during the trial, and particularly in closing arguments, about the course of this defendant's conduct before, during, and after. And at each stage in what happened that night, the defendant was absolutely an active participant in what happened. So, let's look at the video here in a moment. This is 9:15 that morning. This person in the front with the hat is the defendant. That's him. They are returning a dog. He's with Brittany Nicholson, Sophia Ozer. You'll meet both of them tomorrow. And a third person. They're returning the dog to Mr. Rhinehart at 9:15 Christmas morning. You'll see the video of this. They basically go in. It's a pretty routine sort of interaction. So the defendant, who by all accounts doesn't know Mr. Rhinehart well, absolutely knows where he lives at that point. He then chronologically starts sending texts to Mr. Rhinehart. You might want to check on who I am, see how real I am about doing this. Matter of fact, I'm going to have to call you. Matter of fact, me and Chad are going to come visit you. The only thing I'm trying to do is do business with your ass, but if you want to be coming op, then you could be coming op. Op, you'll hear, is kind of a phrase for opposition. And the second text here why are you talking all this trash? Dude, all I gotta do is throw a marble at your back. You see that continued at the top of that text. We'll talk about how law enforcement came to be in possession of these texts, but certainly you could find this to be threatening. This is a communication that the defendant is sending to Mr. Rhinehart's phone earlier in the day on Christmas. He's reading those in the middle of the day. And the phone number 258-8864, we'll talk about how we tie that to the defendant as well. So that brings us to the evening hours. 17:55, you see the timestamp at the top of the screen. It's 5:55 in the evening. This is a Marathon station, basically directly behind Mr. Rhinehart's residence. This is the 2015 Kia Sportage driven by Jessica Granger, who we hope we'll hear from during the course of the trial. She's currently in the hospital. We're hoping she'll be available. That's the defendant. Gentleman on the driver's side of the car, the evidence will show that's Chad Kinney. Get out of the vehicle, walk together in the direction, and you'll see that that's consistent with moving towards Mr. Rhinehart's residence. And this is the offense. A couple minutes of video here. And the defendant in the dark clothing, Mr. Kinney in the white pants.
Yo, some hoes. Whoever out here knocking, run off some hoes. Fuck I thought.
A few things from this video, pretty self-explanatory, right? You see the defendant at the beginning. He's between these two residences looking in the window. You see Mr. Kinney coming around, and he stands here as if he's waiting, and he's got a clear line of fire if anybody comes to the door. The defendant then, almost as if he gives him a signal, Mr. Kinney walks around the side of the building, the defendant walks around the front of the building. They hear someone come to the door. Mr. Kinney comes back around and fires the shots. You'll see this door. The light is a little bit glaring in the video, but it's a pretty standard wooden front door. There are 4 bullet holes in the door. 2 of the shots entered the refrigerator. 2 of the shots struck Mr. Rhinehart. One of them was a graze wound to his leg. The other entered his chest and caused his death. This is the area, just to show the relative locations that we'll be talking about here. The Marathon station where the Kia is parked is here. You'll see video evidence during the trial that after they left the area of the Marathon, they kind of walked over this way and around to the front of 1621 Wells Street. El Rinconcito is a Mexican restaurant right next door. That's the source of the video that we just watched. They just happen to have cameras. The Marathon Station obviously has cameras as well. You'll see after the shooting video evidence of the two of them together, leaving, running together up until about this area right here, the intersection there. I think it's an alley. And then Mr. Williams continues straight to Huffman. He's caught on videotape at 415 Huffman, turns left. He's located on videotape at 509 Huffman, and he's picked up by that Kia Sportage right in this area here. You'll see this kind of open industrial lot where he's picked up. Mr. Kinney is picked up right behind the Marathon Station. Again, all of that on video. They leave together. You'll see that almost within about 20 minutes of Mr. Rhinehart's death, and this is kind of a sad postscript here, in the apartment when he was shot was an individual named Michael Beers. You won't hear from Mr. Beers. He's not been cooperative with the investigation other than to say, I don't know anything about anything. Just happened to be in the apartment when Mr. Rhinehart got shot. But you'll see people coming in and out of the apartment prior to 911 being called. You'll see Mr. Beers taking things out. You'll see another person showing up and taking things out. You'll hear from Detective Anglin about how they identified those people. But obviously we know the shooting occurred prior to them getting there. Eventually, a witness shows up, Tiana Miller, I'm sorry, her name just flew out of my head, shows up. Tiana is somebody who knew Mr. Rhinehart. She was planning to come over that night. About 8:30, she comes over with an individual named Devin Wallace and a third person. They go to the residence, the door is ajar, they go inside, they discover Mr. Rhinehart deceased in his living room. We saw that image earlier, and they finally call 911 about a half hour after the shooting. Law enforcement responds. One of the responding officers, and you'll hear from Officer Josh Francisci about what he found when he went inside. Very shortly after he arrived, a detective named Amanda Miller came to the apartment. She walked in, saw Philip deceased in the living room, and she also saw a phone, that phone that we referenced on the TV stand. And the phone was lit up, it wasn't locked. And she looked at it and she saw those text messages that we looked at a moment ago. There's some other images that she took as well, including a phone call from the defendant's call the phone to Mr. Rhinehart shortly before he died. She had the presence of mind to take pictures of those text messages and that phone call as the phone was open there at the scene. That's important because the phone was later collected by law enforcement and the police were not able to gain access to the phone. You know, phones can be difficult to get into, even for law enforcement sometimes, so they weren't able to get into that phone. But she had the presence of mind to preserve those threatening text messages that came from the defendant. The investigation begins at that point. They canvass the area, they locate videotape or video evidence at 415 Huffman, 509 Huffman, the Marathon Station, El Rinconcito. They tie the vehicle to Jessica Granger. They start developing suspect information. Chad Kinney is developed as a suspect. That phone number, that 258 number that was texting Mr. Rhinehart, they asked for subscriber information for that number from Verizon phone carrier. Came back to the defendant, Shawn Williams. He was later arrested the next day with a phone in his possession that sure enough had that 258 number. So that was taken from his person. They were also able to do some location data from the phone and found that that phone was in the area during the time of the homicide. So they tied that number from which those text messages came back to the defendant in multiple ways. You'll hear from Sophia Ozer, who was in the vehicle. She'll identify the defendant. She'll identify Chad Kinney as the people who got out of the vehicle and walked to the victim's residence. And she'll talk about what led up to that. She will testify she didn't know anything about what was going to happen until they got there. So clearly they talked about it before they arrived. All of which brings us full circle back here. You know, factually, this is not one of the more complicated homicide cases that you'll ever see. They were unfortunate enough, I guess, to get caught on video all the way through the crime. And you'll hear about the defendant's actions before the scene occurred. You'll hear and see what he did while Mr. Rhinehart was being shot. And you'll hear and see afterwards how he continued to have contact with Mr. Kinney and leave the scene with Mr. Kinney afterwards. So he's present, he fails to oppose, he's in companionship with another person who's committing the offense, and you look at that before, during, and after. In this case, it really becomes very simple. So we will ask you at the conclusion of the evidence in this trial to talk about everything you've seen and heard. Again, this is a little bit of a sketch. The real evidence comes from the witness stand. But pay attention to everything that you see and hear. At the conclusion of the case, we're going to ask you to hold him responsible for this, based on what we will submit as the overwhelming evidence of his guilt. We'll ask you to evaluate the criminal choices he made on Christmas Day 2024 and to hold him accountable for those choices, and essentially tell him that the evidence convinces us that those choices have consequences. So, on behalf of the state of Indiana, on behalf of Mr. Rhinehart's family, but especially on behalf of the evidence that was collected during the course of the investigation, we appreciate very much your attentiveness during the course of the trial. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.